Welcome to Disciple Dojo. One of the things that we do here on this channel, in addition to our scholar interviews and study Bible reviews and our superhero seminary videos, that's why I'm surrounded by these toys on the shelf behind me. They're not just decoration. We do a lot of stuff here on the channel, but one of the things that we do that is sort of a key component is in-depth biblical teaching. We've taught through numerous books in the Torah. We've been working through the Psalms. We have a whole in-depth study through the book of Revelation. And in this series, we're going to take a look at a book that doesn't get as much notoriety as some of the other books in the Bible. It's short, it's got a funny name, but it is remarkably relevant. And one of my absolute favorite books, and that is the book of Habakkuk, or some people say Habakkuk. It's only 3 chapters. It's not a long book, but it packs a punch. It is a profound book. And it's one that I think the church would do well to get more familiar with. So as we get started, if you appreciate these type of long-form teaching series that we do here on the channel and you want to see more of them, best way to ensure that is by subscribing to this channel if you haven't already. Click the little bell icon to enable notifications, and then help get the word out about Disciple Dojo. Share our videos, tell other people about us. All of this stuff really, really helps this ministry grow. I'm excited to talk about Habakkuk. It's a book that I have fallen in love with, and I have been looking forward for a long time to teaching it here on the channel. So without further ado, let's get into the book of Habakkuk. Now, before we actually start going line by line through the book, I want to share some resources that I have found incredibly helpful. There are a lot of good commentaries out there, and if you watched our other series here on the channel, like our recent Olivet Discourse series that we've done, you know that I'm a big believer in reading from and pulling from all of the brilliant minds out there that have been studying whatever passage or book you are studying. We do ourselves and the body of Christ an extreme disservice when we don't listen to the voices of all of the teachers that God has equipped and called and gifted throughout the history of the church. And so I'm going to start with what I think is the best for popular level reading. If you are new to studying Habakkuk, if this is, it's unfamiliar territory, or you want to study it in a small group setting, I would absolutely recommend at the top of the list, Christopher Wright's book, Hearing the Message of Habakkuk, Living by Faith in a Violent World. This book is short. It's just over 100 pages. There are discussion questions at the end of each section. It is absolutely phenomenal. Anyone can read this. This is number one, top of my list, recommendations out there. You should have this book if you are at all interested in understanding this minor prophet. Christopher Wright, Hearing the Message of Habakkuk. Another commentary that I found extremely helpful, and it's also not at a super scholarly level, it's enough for a popular level readers, is Susan Maxwell Booth's Habakkuk commentary in the Christian Standard Commentary series. This is based on the CSB Bible translation, and it just walks through the book section by section. It gets into some of the more scholarly discussions, but again, it's not overly technical. This is aimed at preachers, pastors, Sunday school teachers. Anybody could follow this if you are at all interested in in-depth biblical study. Susan Maxwell Booth's Habakkuk in the Christian Standard Commentary series. Then a more technical, but still not too technical commentary that's really good is Kenneth Turner's commentary in the Zondervan's exegetical commentary on the Old Testament. But it presupposes that you have familiarity with Hebrew. You don't have to read Hebrew, but some of the pages, like if you know anything about this series, the pages will have the Hebrew text in this column, and then the author's translation in this column, and then an outline. That's just how this series works. This is an exegetical commentary. It's presupposing that you're working from or with the original languages. Every volume I've seen in this series, by the way, this is edited by Daniel Block. Every volume I've seen in this series so far, I've been really impressed with, and this one is no exception. Kenneth Turner, Habakkuk in Zondervan's exegetical commentary on the Old Testament. And then the last one that I'm going to recommend, this is actually in a larger one-volume commentary. This is Langham Publishing has put out the Central and Eastern European Bible Commentary. So all of the scholars, this is all the books of the Bible. All of the scholars in this come from Central or Eastern Europe. And the section on Habakkuk in here is by Theochorus, and it's only like 6 pages of this volume. Again, this is a commentary on the whole Bible, but it is so good. Her commentary on Habakkuk in this is one of the best that I've ever come across. Pound for pound, this is at the top of the commentary heap. I mean, it's only 6 pages, whereas these are closer to 200 pages. But those pages are amazing. So this is just a great resource in general, regardless of whether it's Habakkuk or any other book of the Bible. This commentary series is great, and it's also good because it's not produced from a North American context. So you're intentionally getting a more global look. And Langham has other volumes in this series. They have the Africa Bible commentary. They have the Central Asia Bible commentary. So this is the Central and Eastern European Bible commentary. Theochorus, her Habakkuk section is phenomenal. And you're also going to see me reference my translation. Part of what I do whenever I teach through a book or a part of the Bible is I try to do my own translation first. This is not because I think that the translations out there are wrong or bad or anything like that. This is so that I can have a working familiarity with the text in the original languages, whether it's the Hebrew Masoretic text or the text of the Septuagint. I want to be able to see the text, and I want to be able to show people who aren't able to read Hebrew or Greek as closely as I can how the text looks in the original languages. And so because of that, I do this, what I call a paralinear translation. So the Hebrew text on this side, occasionally there will be something from, for instance, in this case, the Septuagint. Sometimes I'll pull from either the Targum, maybe the Dead Sea Scrolls, something like that. But this is just to get down at the granular level and looking at the text of Scripture because it's important. There are just things that are hard to translate into English. And Habakkuk is one of the books where there is a wide range of choices that translators have to make. And so if you're just reading one translation, whichever your preferred translation is, King James, ESV, New American Standard, whatever, you're going to miss something if you're only reading it in one translation. In addition to my translation, I will also at times reference other English translations, just sort of the main ones that are out there, kind of like what we do in our Psalms study, if you've watched any of that. So that's what I just pull these up in Logos. Sometimes I might use a concordance if I don't have a particular translation in Logos. But this, if you don't have the original languages, being able to compare the different translations is huge. Now, if you don't have Logos, you don't have a concordance because those are not cheap. There are free resources out there available, and I want to point you to 2 in particular that'll help you do what we're doing. The first is stepbible.org. Now, I have this in dark mode just because if I do it in normal mode, it usually looks, I'll switch it so you can disable dark mode, and this is kind of how it looks by default. But you can choose, it has a number of translations available, and not just in English, other modern languages. I've done a video on Step Bible. I've also had one of the people who works at Step Bible, Mark Cannon, here on the channel to talk about it. It doesn't just have Bible translations. It has a number of other resources. It has commentaries. It's a free resource. STEP stands for Scripture Tools for Every Person. That's what the STEP in Step Bible stands for. And so Step Bible is great. You choose which translations you want to display. You can choose to view them interleaved, which is what this is, where every verse, all the different translations appear verse by verse. Or you can view it in columns, and you can compare the translations side by side as well. Step Bible, fantastic resource, entirely free. And then another resource, again, that's completely free and is also a friend of the channel, we've reviewed this on an episode as well, is crossbible.com. Crossbible.com lets you compare up to 4 different translations at once. You can switch these. So I have, in this case, the King James, the American Standard, the Leningrad Codex, and the NIV. If you wanted to switch the American Standard, let's say you wanted to do the Berean Study Bible, you can switch that up. So you can compare these. And just like with Step Bible, you can also switch it where each verse is interwoven as well. So crossbible.com or stepbible.org, both are excellent resources. Both are entirely free online. So as we start to study Habakkuk, those are resources for you to have available. I will link all of those in the video description below on each video in this series. So if you're wondering, oh, what was that you had mentioned? I didn't see it when you put it on the screen. Tap on the video description. If you're watching this on your phone or a tablet, tap on the title of the video. It'll expand and everything should be linked there below. So let's talk about Habakkuk, the name, the book. Habakkuk. In the Septuagint, it's much cooler. It's ambakum. I love the way that sounds, ambakum. In English, Habakkuk. There's question about what it comes from. The most likely verb that the name comes from is chabak, and chabak means to embrace. But the Septuagint name, ambakum, there is an actual plant, a Babylonian plant, hambakuku or habakuku. And it's a specific type of plant in Babylon. And of course, Babylon is going to be one of the main emphases of Habakkuk's vision. So it's possible that the name has something to do with that. Now, why spend time studying Habakkuk? There's an interpreter, KG Jose. It's not Jose because I think he's from India. I don't think this is the Spanish version, Jose. But he summed it up. He said, the words of the Lord in Habakkuk are unexpected answers to complicated questions that we also struggle with. And that became remarkably clear as I was preparing this study. And then as I actually taught through this book on our recent grown-ups table, single adults retreat. Last month, over 100 of us went down to a retreat center down on an island on the coast of Georgia. It was amazing. And every night we studied Habakkuk together. And the more I studied and have taught on this book, the more I've realized, man, this book is so relevant for the world today. But in order to see that, we need to get a lay of the land. And that's what this first opening session is going to be. If we can put ourselves back into the world of Habakkuk, then his words are going to take on so much more meaning and significance. Now, there's a little bit of a challenge because scholars don't all agree on exactly when Habakkuk was writing. Generally, he is writing in the 600s BC, so the 7th century BC. But there's question about during which king's reign was he writing in? And without getting into all of the minute history and all of the details, again, a good commentary, a good study Bible, a good Bible atlas, they'll give you this information and you can go as deep as you want. But for the purpose of this study, I just want us to get a broad understanding of the world into which God spoke through Habakkuk. So back up to the 8th century, the 700s BC. You had the Assyrian Empire, and this is the capital here, Nineveh, one of the other cities, Ashur, it's where the name Assyria comes from. But the Assyrian Empire was pretty big. It is the empire that came and destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel and almost destroyed Jerusalem in the southern kingdom as well. In 701 BC, you can read about this in Isaiah 36 and 37, Assyria almost came and took over everything. But for whatever reason, and the biblical authors give the reason, but then the Assyrian king, Sennacherib, has his version of the events. What is undisputed is that Assyria had ravaged and destroyed the northern kingdom, dispersed the tribes, and almost took over all of the southern kingdom of Judah as well. They besieged Jerusalem, and then they withdrew. Now, again, the biblical account, which is the account I think obviously is the trustworthy one, is going to say it was because of what God did and miraculously intervening and saving Jerusalem under Hezekiah. But you will have the Assyrian account, which of course is going to put it in their terms, which is the king boasting that he destroyed everything and he left Hezekiah shut up like a bird in a cage. Regardless of right at the turn of the 7th century, 701 BC, going into the 600s, that's what had happened. Now, the northern kingdom was destroyed, and it never came back. It was never restored. The southern kingdom continued on. Jerusalem continued on. The Davidic dynasty continued. And in 687 BC, in Judah, Manasseh became king. And Manasseh was a horrendously evil king. Manasseh did every single thing that Scripture prohibited kings from doing. He was probably the worst king in Judah's history. And the thing that's crazy is his reign was one of, if not the longest reigns of all of the kings. But he was awful. He did everything awful. And you can read about this in the historical books. But in 640 BC, so decades of evil King Manasseh's rule, eventually Josiah becomes king of Judah. And Josiah seeks to reform Judah. All during this time, Assyria is the dominant superpower. And when Josiah comes on the scene, he seeks to not just reform the southern kingdom, but he also seeks to resist Assyria. See, the way all these small kingdoms worked is if you were not one of these superpowers like Assyria up here or Egypt down here, all of these little mini kingdoms in between these two big superpowers basically had to pick a side and side with who they think was going to do the least amount of damage to them. So some rulers would say, no, we want to actually resist Assyria, so we're going to side with Egypt. And others would say, no, Assyria is the dominant power and siding with Egypt is going to be bad because they're going to lose. So you were trying to pick the winner, like who to side with among these two warring superpowers. Now, during the 7th century, there was a new threat arising, and that is this entity down here, Babylon. Babylon was old. Babylon went all the way back to the patriarchal times and before. But the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the new Babylonian Empire, was coming on the scene, and it was starting to become a threat to Assyria. And when the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal died in 627 BC, so roughly 60 years after Manasseh rose to power, and during the middle of Josiah's reign, the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, he dies. And that was kind of the beginning of the end of Assyria's dominance. Assyria recognized that Babylon was rising and they were going to be a threat. So Assyria actually decided to form a coalition with Egypt. And Egypt and Assyria were going to join forces against the rising threat of Babylon. Well, in 609 BC, so at the coming up on the end of the 7th century BC, Josiah decided that he wanted to stop Egypt from coming and helping Assyria to fight against Babylon. And so in this battle, Josiah dies. Judah, the southern kingdom, comes under default Egyptian rule, and the Egyptians appoint this guy Jehoiakim as a vassal, kind of a little puppet ruler of Judah, so that they can kind of better control things. And then 4 years later, Babylon is unstoppable. Nebuchadnezzar, at this place called Carchemish, Nebuchadnezzar beats the combined forces of Assyria and the Egyptian armies, beats them, chases them down, rides after them, completely wipes them out, and Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, takes over basically what belonged to them all the way down to the borders of Egypt. So Jerusalem, Judah, comes under now Babylonian control. And this is when Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, when they get deported, that first wave of deportees. Later, Babylon is going to take more people into exile, including a young priest named Ezekiel, over back to Babylon. And then eventually, Babylon's going to just get tired of dealing with it and going to completely destroy Jerusalem, destroy the temple, and disperse or take into exile the remaining people of the southern kingdom. So all of that is kind of what's going on in the 600s BC. So this is the world into which Habakkuk speaks. Now there's question, is Habakkuk writing during Manasseh's reign? Well, there's some things that Habakkuk talks about that would fit very well in that period. Is he writing during the brief reign of Ammon, like not even a year? Possibly, that's a short window. Is he writing under Josiah? There's some other things that seem to fit within Josiah, which is the second half of the 7th century BC. Or is he writing at the turn of the 7th to the 6th century, so 600s into 500s, at the very end before the southern kingdom is destroyed by Babylon and completely taken into exile? People have made the case for that as well. I think there's no need to be more precise than to just say Habakkuk was writing into the world of the 600s BC. So that's the setting, that's the lay of the land. There are these mighty superpowers. Assyria been dominant for a couple of centuries. Egypt has been dominant for a long time as well, but they've kind of been tucked away down here in the south. Babylon is the new kid on the block, the rising superpower. And in the middle of it are all of these little kingdoms in the Levant, in Palestine, in this land, the land of Israel, northern kingdom Israel, southern kingdom Judah, and also places like Edom and Moab and all these others. So this is what's going on. This is the lay of the land. And knowing that, now we can start to hear Habakkuk's message a little more clearly. And so we're going to look in this episode at the first section of Habakkuk, the very beginning of the book. And I'll read it through, and then we'll maybe look at some more things in detail in the actual Hebrew text. But it begins, and again, this is my kind of literary translation, kind of keeping the poetic layout of the book and to try to make the text as transparent as possible. It begins, the burden, literally the burden, the masa, that Habakkuk the prophet beheld. We'll come back to that. How long, Yahweh, must I scream for help, and you do not listen? I cry out to you, violence, but you don't save. Why do you show me disaster and toil? You just watch. And destruction and violence before me, and there's lawsuit and strife that it carries. Because of this, Torah has grown cold or limp, and justice never goes forth. Indeed, wickedness is surrounding the righteous. Because of this, justice goes forth crooked. So this is the beginning of the book. This is how it starts. And Christopher Wright points out, Habakkuk is unusual among the prophets. Surprisingly, he does not start out with a word from God to deliver to the people, like a lot of the other prophets, the word of the Lord came to fill in the blank. Rather, he begins with a word of his own delivered to God. Habakkuk launches straight into a debate with God. So if you find yourself sometimes racked with questions, unable to see a way to sort them all out in your head, and perhaps questioning God himself, quite frankly, and quite biblically, you're in very good company. So the beginning of Habakkuk, right here, hamasa, the masa. Masa is literally something you carry. It's from the verb to lift, nasa, to lift, to take up. So it's something that you have to carry. It's a burden. And it's the term used for an oracle, like a prophetic word that's so vivid or so real that it's heavy. Like we would say it's weighty, maybe in English, but it's how you would talk about an oracle. But it's important, I think, to recognize the first word of the book is the burden. Habakkuk is a burdened prophet. And another interesting thing, hamasa asher chazah, the burden which, asher just means which, chazah, he beheld. Chazah is to behold, to gaze at, to look upon. We don't think about a prophetic oracle as something you see. We think about it as something you hear or something you maybe feel intuitively. But Habakkuk is going to see things. God's going to show him things. So very interesting way that the book starts. And then the first word that is spoken is this compound Hebrew word. And if you don't know Hebrew, this word is one of my favorite words in all of the Bible. It's actually two words together. That's what the little dash here showing that this is one phrase. Ad Ana. And then there's the divine name, Yahweh. Ad Ana Adonai. Adonai is just Lord. So observant Jews and Christians who want to honor that by not saying the name Yahweh. I don't have a problem saying the name Yahweh, but some people, it's absolutely forbidden. And I get it. And I want to be sensitive to that. So if I'm reading along in Hebrew, usually I'll just say Adonai because that's what these vowels are telling you to read. But regardless, this is God's name, his personal name, and it begins Ad Ana Adonai, literally until when. And we would translate that into English, how long, Yahweh, Lord, how long must I scream, Shivati, yell, cry out. I mean, even cry out can kind of sound a little pious, but he's screaming. And he's screaming, Velo tishma, but not you listen. This begins with an indictment of God. Habakkuk begins his book with an indictment of God. How long, Lord, must I scream and you don't listen? This is a theme that's common in the Psalms. A lot of the Psalms of lament have this phrase, Ad Ana Adonai. How long, O Lord? This is a proper and godly response to evil, especially evil that we're looking at, that we are seeing, that we are experiencing. How long, O Lord? Miro Theochorus says, the question, how long, shows a person nearing the limits of endurance, who sees no end to the injustice around him and whose hopes have been crushed many times. However, the pain of the sufferer is not caused primarily by the wrongdoing, but by the absence of meaning. God's attitude is unfathomable. See, this is what makes pain so much worse. We can understand we live in a fallen world. We live in an evil world. We live in a world filled with violence. We live like we're almost just used to it. But what torments people of faith, going all the way back to the ancient writers of the Hebrew Bible, what torments them is the seeming absence of God in that suffering. The absence of meaning is what makes suffering unbearable. You can think about Viktor Frankl, a Jewish author, writing about his experience in the Holocaust. And he wrote a powerful book, Man's Search for Meaning. His conclusion was humans can suffer immense evil if we see meaning in it. If there's some meaning or significance, or we can kind of attach some purpose to it, we can go through unimaginable evils and not lose hope. But without there being some meaning that we can understand or wrap our minds around in some way, it becomes overwhelming emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually. And so that's what Habakkuk is wrestling with right at the beginning of the book. How long, Lord, must I scream for help and you don't listen? This is the cry of Job. This is what Kohelet, the author of Ecclesiastes, was wrestling with for much of that book. This is what the psalmists, particularly the lament psalms, this is what they grapple with. And then he gets specific about what he's screaming out. I cry out to you, violence, but you don't save. And the word he uses, violence, ḥamas. This is an easy word for Hebrew students to remember because it sounds like the acronym Hamas, which is the militant group in the Middle East. So people think they're related. They're not actually related. The modern Hamas movement is an acronym in a different language using different letters. This is just easy for a lot of people to remember this Hebrew word Hamas. Hamas, violence. I cry out violence, but not Toshia. This is the word save, salvation, yasha, to save. This is where the name Yeshua, Jesus, comes from, because he will save his people from their sins. It literally means deliverance from violence. God saving Israel out of Egypt, that was him delivering Israel out of Egypt and out of the violence and the oppression, saving. And only later did it take on kind of a spiritual nuance of like being saved, which now in modern English, we hear being saved and we immediately think of a spiritual conversion experience, saved from sin. But it was very much literal in Habakkuk's day. I cry out to you violence, but you don't save. Why? Lama, that's another good Hebrew word to know. Lama, why? Literally, for what? Why? Thareni. This is to cause to look, to make someone look at something. Why do you, and so we would say, show me. Why do you make me look at avain? Avain means disaster. So why do you show me avain, disaster? Va'amal, and toil or trouble. This word appears a lot in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes. Amal, usually translated as toil, but can also be, trouble or drudgery, whatever, however you want to translate amal. Why do you make me look at avain, disaster, and amal, tabit, you look at, you watch. Now, to bring out the sense, I added this word in English because that's what he's saying. You just watch. You don't act. It's like you look at from a distance. You're watching this toil. You're watching the amal. So you're making me look at avain and you're just watching amal. This is what he's asking God. Vasod, sod is destruction. Vasod and sod, vahamas, violence. So destruction and violence, lenegdi, are before me, are to my face, or are alongside me, in my proximity. Neged it can mean opposite of, or it can mean alongside, or it can mean in front of, or it can mean like concordance to. But this is what he's around. Sod and Hamas, destruction and violence. And Vahi Riv. And there is Riv. Riv is the word for lawsuit, for bringing a dispute before a governing or a judicial body. That's a riv. So there is vahi, there is riv, there's lawsuit, umadon yasa, and strife it carries. And there's that word from nasa, to lift. This is what masa at the beginning. It's the verb form of that, to carry or to lift. So there's riv, there's lawsuit, and strife it carries. Contentious, like people think of like a litigious society. Al-Kain, because of this, tapug Torah, she has grown cold or grown limp. useless, ineffective Torah. There's the word right there, Torah. Torah was God's ordering of ancient Israel society as his covenant people. Torah was how Israel was supposed to live in covenant with the Lord in the ancient Near East, and their society was to be one that people looked to for justice and for righteousness and for upholding the rights of the poor and the oppressed and the foreigner and the widow and the orphan. It was supposed to be a beacon in the ancient world to the Egyptians and the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Edomites and all the other kingdoms. That's what Torah was supposed to do. But because of all of what's going on around Habakkuk in Judah, he says she's grown cold, tapug, she's grown useless. Velo yetze, and not it goes forth, lanetzach, never, mishpat, justice. Crucial word in the Hebrew Bible, this word mishpat. Mishpat means justice, right judgment. It's from the verb shafat, to judge. Justice is supposed to go forth. Like a judge is supposed to issue a verdict or make a ruling, and it's like justice going forth. We say in English, justice is served. In Hebrew, it would be justice goes forth. And so Habakkuk is planning justice never goes forth. Ki rasha maktir, indeed, rasha, wickedness. Rasha is the opposite of mishpat. Rasha, wickedness, maktir, is surrounding eth hasadik, the righteous. So not only is justice not going forth, but wickedness is encircling, is surrounding, maktir, wickedness on all sides. That's what Habakkuk is complaining. And because of that, al-ken yetze, justice goes forth, ma'ukal, crooked. So it's a little bit of irony. So like justice never goes forth. Actually, justice does go forth. It goes forth crooked. This is the opening, the first 4 lines of Habakkuk. And so Chris Wright picks up on these word pairs that we talked about: disaster, toil, destruction, violence, dispute, strife. He says these are the marks of a sick and decadent society. They are words you could use when the crime rate is escalating. Antisocial behavior is becoming routine. Violence is happening on the streets. Society is divided against itself in constant litigation and contention. Economic chaos and endless political arguing and fighting are raging with no solution. And in the midst of everything, ordinary people are suffering and afraid. These are evils that embed themselves in the structures and practices of fallen human societies in ways that, of course, involve individual sinful acts, but compound and amplify them in ways that cause massive suffering on all sides. This is what Habakkuk is wrestling with. This is how he opens his book. In this study, because I have taught this live, what we did on the retreat where I taught this was after each session, I gave the audience discussion questions, and then they broke into smaller groups and kind of went to wherever in the retreat center and had discussion about this. So if you're watching this, let's say you're watching this as a part of your Sunday school class or your small group, this is a study you could do as a small group. I'm going to end by asking these questions. And so if you are using this as study material, then you can, pause and have these up on the screen. So here are the questions you can discuss as a group. Number 1, going into this study, how familiar are you with the book of Habakkuk? Have you ever read it? Have you read it a lot? Have you studied it? Did you not even know it's in the Bible? Talk about that in your group. Second question to talk about, have you ever cried out to God but got no answer? If so, how did that affect your faith? Were you told growing up that you're not supposed to cry out to God, that you're always supposed to rejoice? Number 3, in what ways is our world like Habakkuk's world of the 7th century BC? And in what ways is it different? So these are some questions that you can discuss as a group. And stay tuned for the next session in our study through this short but powerful book tucked away deep in your Old Testament, the book of Habakkuk. That's all for now. If you appreciate this study and others like it that we have here at Disciple Dojo, if you haven't already, we'd love for you to subscribe. And another way you can help us is this is a nonprofit teaching ministry. We're a 501c3. Anything that people donate helps keep this ministry going. If you appreciate and would like to tangibly help Disciple Dojo continue to do more stuff like this, we would love for you to become a monthly dojo donor. There's a donation page. I'll put the link right here on the screen. You can give any amount that you want, either one time or what really helps us is small monthly giving. That's actually more helpful than big one-time gifts. But if you do become a dojo donor, Don't tell me, you don't have to tell me how much. I don't see any of that. That's handled by our finance director and our board. But if you do become a dojo donor, I would love to just send you as a thank you one of our iron-on patches. So you can shoot me a message through our website, just the contact form, and just let me know, do you want a light color patch or do you want a dark color patch? These are iron-on or you can sew them on. Just a small, tangible way for me to say thank you. Thank you for supporting this ministry. Our monthly dojo donors really are the backbone of everything we do. We don't sell any of our study resources. We turn ads off during teaching videos like this so that if you are using them in a small group setting, you're not getting interrupted with YouTube ads in the middle of the teaching. And as a result, we just trust that God will send people to us who believe in what we're doing and want to support us freely. So if that's you, we would love to invite you to do just that. But that'll do for now. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for session 2 in our study through the book of Habakkuk. And in the meantime, as always, keep training.